Amen. Let's look at Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. John says, "Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and his great authority." Now, in chapter 12, we see who's behind all of the evil in the world. It's the dragon. Now, who's the dragon in this symbolism? Satan. Satan is the archenemy of God and the archenemy of God's people. And so, Revelation chapter 12 gives us the big picture of who's behind all this and the warfare that's going on. In chapter 13, God is going to show John more specifically who the devil is using to accomplish his work and how that this is a fulfillment of prophecy. Chapter 13 is very important because it shows the agents of the devil, and it ties it back into the book of Daniel. That's why we studied the book of Daniel first and then went into the book of Revelation, because of Revelation chapter 13. Now, an overview of Daniel. Daniel the prophet in Daniel chapter 2. Do you remember Nebuchadnezzar had this vision of this image here? Nobody knows what it looks like. That's just an artist's rendition. And to make a long story short, Daniel interprets the vision as referring to the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, the Grecian, and the Roman Empire. 4 empires. Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, they were in the Babylonian Empire. Then there would arise the other 3 after, the final one being the Roman Empire. That's very important in understanding the next chapter that we're going to look at, Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7 gives different imagery to say the same thing. Daniel chapter 7 is giving different imagery to say the same exact thing. Daniel saw a vision. If you see verse 4 of Daniel 7, he saw these creatures coming out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings, and I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Suddenly there was another beast that was like a bear. We'll skip through verse 6. Look, and there was another beast like a leopard. And then verse 7, there was a 4th beast. Notice verse 7, Daniel 7 and verse 7. I saw in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet, and it was different from all the other beasts and that were before it. And it had 10 horns. What did the beast have that John saw in Revelation 13? It had 10 horns. This is pinpointing for us the time frame for the book of Revelation. It is in the 4th empire that Daniel sees. All of these animals correspond to that image. Babylon, Medo-Persian, Grecian, and Rome. Of course, no one knows what that animal looked like. This is an artist's rendition of the creature. But notice it has 10 horns. This is the Roman Empire. It corresponds to the legs and the feet there of the Roman Empire. This is very important to get the time frame and the context to help us understand what's going on in the book of Revelation. So when people take the book of Revelation and they try to make it be referring to 20th and 21st century events, they're mishandling the Word of God. The Bible interprets itself. Daniel 7 and verse 7 and 8 tells us exactly what this beast is, because John is talking about the same beast but it is a composite of all these other previous empires. Notice as you look, we're going to go back to Daniel chapter 7, but go back to Revelation 13 as we look at it here. He sees this beast rising up out of the sea. It had 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns on its horns, and the heads a blasphemous name. And notice the beast, how it is very much like the beasts previous to it, but a composition of all of them. I saw that it was like a leopard. His feet were that of a bear. Mouth like a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, his great authority. So the one behind the beast is the devil. Now, the next picture is, of course, an artist's rendition of this beast. A composite of all of what you find in Daniel chapter 7 are found in this beast. What's the point of that imagery? All the component parts of Babylon, Medo-Persian, and Greece were found in the Roman Empire. You found it in the Roman Empire. In fact, when you think of Greece, you think of the Greek language. What was the universal language during the Roman Empire? Greek. Our New Testament was written in Greek. So it had elements of all the previous empires. It had 10 horns, as you notice, like the creature in Daniel chapter 7. 10 horns representing authority and power. And it was a composite of all the previous ones. Now, when you look at your chart, the chart is showing you a comparison of those 4 empires. A comparison of those 4 empires. And so you have Daniel chapter 2 showing the initial image, then Daniel chapter 7 using the creatures to correlate with the image, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the iron beast. Then you go to Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, you find that this creature that John sees is like a lion, like a bear, like a leopard, and is a sea creature with 10 horns. I think that proves beyond any shadow of a doubt the time frame of the book of Revelation. It is during the period of this 4th empire, which is the Roman Empire. When you let the Bible interpret itself, you come up with what these passages say. But when people take passages out of their context and say, oh, this is referring to, they did it throughout history. They tried to say that the beast, this creature, is referring to Napoleon Bonaparte. What good would that do to the first century saints and those saints who were being persecuted to know Napoleon was going to come up and conquer France? How's that going to help them? Or others say, well, this is Adolf Hitler. Or this is Saddam Hussein. Or Osama bin Laden. Or they just assign it. And they try to pinpoint it. And events in the Middle East they try to find in the book of Revelation. That's mishandling the Word of God. And people write books about it, make a lot of money on it. They have all kind of seminars about it. Of course, you have to pay money to go to these seminars. Again, making money. And you just let the Bible interpret itself and just take the plain meaning of these passages and see how they correlate with one another. And you see that this is talking about the 4th world empire. And so you see here that this agent of the devil that God is using is the Roman Empire. Now, Revelation chapter 13, let's go back and see it in verse 1. I stood on the sand of the sea. Sea oftentimes in prophetic language represents humanity, the sea of humanity. saw a beast rising up out of the sea. An empire rises, having 7 heads and 10 horns. 7 being a number of completion, 10 being a number of completion. And on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now, is there anything in history, as far as the Caesars are concerned, the emperors, that would be considered blasphemy? Yes, no, maybe. Idol worship. And what did the Caesars want from the people? They wanted worship. They wanted to be considered Lord and a God, a deity. And the one who really kind of took this seriously was Domitian. Nero he was the first one to really give the Christians a hard time. And persecution under the Roman Empire during Nero's time was pretty intense. He was responsible for killing the Apostle Paul, Apostle Peter. But then I think he was assassinated, and there was kind of a turmoil within the empire for a while. Then Domitian rose up in the 80s of the first century, and he took up where Nero left off in persecuting the Christians. So there was that blasphemous thing in which people want to be deified. They want to be worshipped. And that is the blasphemous name. They would give themselves blasphemous titles, like the divine or something of that nature. And we see that today in religious circles, do we not? Reverend, calling religious leaders reverend, that's a blasphemous title. That goes back to Roman Catholicism, which goes back to the Roman Empire. We could trace that in some other time. But anyone going around with the title of reverend, that's a blasphemous title. Only God is reverend. Anyone goes around calling himself Holy Father, again, that's a blasphemous title. There's only one Holy Father, that's God. And so blasphemy is a characteristic of this empire. Verse 2. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like that of a bear. His mouth was like that of a mouth of a lion. A composite of all the previous empires. The dragon gave him his authority, his throne, and his power. His power, his throne, and authority. The dragon is behind it. The dragon, Satan, is behind this. And you can say that about any evil empire. The Nazi Germany, what was behind that? Satan. Satan was behind all that. And any wicked empire that's out to do harm and wickedness in the world, Satan is behind it. So Satan is using this empire that Daniel saw, he saw it was going to happen, to hurt God's people. Now look at verse 3. I saw one of the heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Imagery, one of the heads looked like it's killed off, and then it's healed, then people marvel. Some suggest that this is referring to what I spoke about earlier. Nero was very much opposed to Christianity. But then he gets killed off, and then the persecution against the church kind of wanes for a while. Then Domitian comes up. He's the new emperor. And then he starts intensely persecuting the Christians. And there was a legend within the Roman Empire that Nero was going to be revived. Nero was going to be resurrected, and they thought Domitian was Nero resurrected. It would be like today someone comes up in Germany and starts persecuting the Jews and the church and people. You think, well, this is Hitler reborn. Not literally, of course, but in the same spirit and attitude. And so Domitian had that reputation of being someone. So some think, well, this deadly wound was the death of Nero, and then Domitian comes along, and he's very much like Nero, and the whole world marvel at the beast. Verse 4, so they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? The Roman Empire was a very powerful empire, and to go up against Rome was something that was basically a suicide mission for any group, because it was one of the most well-trained armies on the face of the earth at that time. Who can go up against it? Who can make war? This is an unstoppable entity. Verse 5. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. 42 months is what? 3.5 years. That's that number that we keep coming across. We come across it in Daniel. We come across it here. 3.5 is half of what? 7. So the time period in which this beast is going to do his damage is not a complete period of time, but an incomplete period of time. His time is going to be cut short. That's what that imagery is telling us. It's only going to be 3.5, 42 months. It talks about his blasphemy, speaking blasphemous things. Verse 6. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. His tabernacle there, I believe, refers to the church. God dwells within his church, and so he's persecuting the church. Now notice verse 7. This goes and ties it back in with Daniel chapter 7. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. It was granted to the Roman Empire to make war with the saints and to overcome them. The saints would be the Christians. Now turn back to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Look at verse 15. Daniel 7 and verse 15. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the vision of my head troubled me. And I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. Yes. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great beasts which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. Verse 17. 4 kings or 4 kingdoms, depending on the translation you might have. Look at verse 18. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Talking about the church right there. Daniel 7 and verse 18 is talking about the establishment of the church. The saints are in the kingdom. Verse 19. Then I wish to know the truth about the 4th beast. That's Rome. Which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet. The 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely the horn which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous or blasphemous words, whose appearance was greater than all his fellows. Verse 21. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. Now verse 21, Daniel 7 and verse 21, is almost word for word what you find in Revelation 13 and verse 7. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So you see here, this empire is making war against the saints and overcoming or prevailing against them. In other words, what that is saying is, and he's talking about the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire looked like it was going to crush the church. It's going to stamp it out. Because what would the church not do? Not worship, but also they weren't going to fight back. Because the church is not a kingdom of this world. It's a spiritual empire. John 18 and verse 36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my followers would fight. But my kingdom is not of this world." So the church, who was just going to give in to it, and it looks like it was going to be slaughtered. And so the Roman Empire looked like it was going to just wipe out the church. Easy pickings. They're not going to fight back. So we go in and arrest them, kill them, put them in the arenas, let the animals tear them up for the Romans' entertainment. Crucify them. Burn them at the stake. And this is what they did. And it looked like, okay, the church is going to be done away with. It's going to be extinct. But the church is God's institution. The church is God's institution. And for that reason, God will avenge His people. You find that throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. God's people will be avenged. And so look further in verse 22. Verse 21, Daniel 7 and verse 21, I was watching, the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. One horn, that's probably in particular referring to particular emperors like Domitian, who were particularly angry and persecuting towards the church. Looks like they were going to prevail against them. Look at verse 22. Until the Ancient of Days came and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Here, the Ancient of Days is referring to God. He came and judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. That's the church. And the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Now look at verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth kingdom shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth. Fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from the other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings that shall arise from the kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous or blasphemous words against the Most High, and shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and he shall intend to change times and laws. Then the saints shall be given into his hands for time, and half a time. What's that? 3.5. Or 42 months. Same thing you find in Revelation chapter 13. John wrote Revelation. 3.5. This is going to be just a partial problem for the church. It's not going to be a complete devastation of the church. It's going to be a partial problem. But notice verse 26. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion, talking about the Roman Empire, to consume and destroy forever. And then the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people and the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all his dominions shall serve and obey him. The point is this. Jesus summed it up like this. The gates of Hades shall not prevail against the church. No matter what happens, no matter what empire arises, church is going to be prevailed. The church is going to prevail. The church is going to be victorious because it follows Christ. Well, they might be persecuted. Some may be killed off. Revelation 2:10, be faithful unto death, I'll give you a crown of life. But the church will prevail. And God brought judgment on the Roman Empire, and it's gone. The church is still here. The Roman Empire is gone. We study about it in history. So that empire was taken away. And the church now can be found all over the world. So, the important thing to remember, we've looked at a lot of information. The important thing to remember is the book of Revelation time frame is during the time of this fourth beast, which is the Roman Empire. It has nothing to do with Russia. It has nothing to do with the United States of America. It has nothing to do with some future Antichrist that some people think is going to arise and deceive people. That's fantasy. That's religious fiction. We stick with what the Bible says. We have it plain before us, and we don't have to rely upon speculation. Any questions or comments before we go any further in Revelation 13? Exactly. And that was the point of the book, to let them know God's with you. Times are going to be rough. You might die, but you be faithful to death, into death, and you'll receive a crown of life. This book was written so that they would be encouraged. And this would be coded language that a person familiar with the Bible would understand. But if a Roman official got this, say, what are you looking at there? Grabs a scroll out of their hands and, what is this about beasts and dragons and stuff? They're not going to understand it. But a Christian would, because they would know their Old Testament. So the second reason for the symbolic language is to hide it from the officials. The officials wouldn't know, the Roman soldiers, they wouldn't know what that meant. That would be just some sort of story to them. But to the Christian who believed in the inspiration of the Bible and knew the book of Daniel would know exactly, this is what this is talking about. It's talking about Rome. Revelation 13 and verse 7 says, and it will be granted to him, talking about the Roman Empire, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. The Roman Empire encompassed many nations, many of the European nations, many of the northern African nations. Many nations fell under the umbrella and the authority, including Palestine, of the Roman Empire. Verse 8, and all who dwell on the earth will worship him whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So everyone else except faithful Christians are going to worship him. I mean, after all, what's one more God if you believe in a bunch of gods? Okay, I believe in 10 gods. Caesar thinks he's a god. Okay, I'll worship him too. That was their mindset. But a Christian says, no, I'm not going to do that. A faithful Christian would say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to worship God. I'm not going to worship this emperor, because that would be idolatry. And notice it says here, talking about the names written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. That phraseology talks about how, kind of ties in with the sermon, God's plan for Jesus to come into the world was from the foundation of the world. For him to be the Lamb slain, to shed his blood, was from the very beginning. And when we become a Christian, our name is written in the book of life. And if we remain faithful, our name will remain in the book of life. Those whose names are in the book of life, those who are faithful Christians, would not worship the emperor. Verse 9 and 10. If anyone has ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. It very much reminds me of what Jesus said. He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. And that's exactly what happened to the Roman Empire. They crumbled from within, from various reasons. It's interesting, he talks about the use of the sword there. Many of the Caesars lost their life due to assassination. They were assassinated, they were killed. Sometimes with a knife, with a dagger. And there was also the problem with external invasion towards the end of the Roman Empire. So everything that the Roman Empire was doing was going to eventually come back upon them. You reap what you sow. And so that's what we have here. Now, beginning in verse 11, you have another beast coming up. Another beast. Verse 11. I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. This is an earth beast. And he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. So this beast coming up out of the earth had 2 horns like a lamb representing religion or sacrifice, but he spoke like a dragon. The one behind this beast, again, is who? Satan. Satan. Look at verse 12. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. So this creature is responsible for causing people to worship the first beast. Throughout the Roman Empire, you had what was called the cult of the Caesar, the cult of the emperor. And what that was officials sent throughout the Roman Empire that would go and they would set up in villages and towns and marketplaces a statue of the emperor. And their job, their purpose was to make sure people worship the emperor. It's called the cult of the emperor. I think the name of it was the Caecilia. I don't know if that's how it's exactly pronounced, but I think that's the word. And their purpose was to enforce emperor worship. They were the religious clergy, if you will, of the Roman Empire that enforced emperor worship. This is what this is referring to because it's forcing people to worship the beast. Verse 13, he performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. Verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Performing these signs and wonders. Did you have tricksters in the first century, charlatans, who were thought of as great sign and wonder performers? Do we have any record of that, of anybody by name in the book of Acts? Simon the sorcerer. He was considered the great power of God, but he was tricking people. Just like a magician knows what to do to trick people. So you have that going on with this group, this cult of the emperor that was performing tricks and tricking people, and people were falling for it. People were falling for these false signs. And it's interesting when you study some of the practices that went on in some of the pagan temples. They had mechanisms within their temples to trick people. They would actually use almost a megaphone type of system, and the priest would be behind the image speaking, and almost like a ventriloquist, that's how you say the word, making that image as though it is speaking to the people. The people say, oh, the image is talking, and they would worship it. The Wizard of Oz type of thing. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But that's what it was. And people would fall for it. Do we have gullible people like that today? Do we not have people today, and I'm not trying to be unkind, they see the image of Mary in a tortilla or a piece of wood or an oil stain in the ground, and they'll build a shrine around it and worship it? That's gullibility. That happens today. That happened 2,000 years ago. People are easily tricked if their mind is not in tune with the truth, not in tune with God's will. And so these people would trick them. It's very interesting in Acts chapter 8, when the true miracle worker came along, Philip, that Simon himself was converted. He saw, here's the real miracles up against the false things that he was doing. And so you have deception going on to get people to worship these images that happen in the first century. Trickery. Verse 16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, which is the number of a man. His number is 666. Now here is the famous 666. Keep it in context. What's going on here? The mark of the beast. You look it up on Google, you'll come up with everything from electronic barcodes on your forehead to microchips to everything. Again, out of context. Completely out of context. The mark or the identification here is referring to those who would worship the beast. They would get a little certificate. They would get a certificate from this cult of the emperor. The officials would watch and see if they would worship the image. When they did, they would get their papers. They would get a certificate, an official certificate that says, excuse me, that they were observed worshiping the image. So it was the mark, the identification with the idolatrous practice. Yes? There's a lot of similarity there. There's a lot of imagery and occult type of images that's found in the Masonic Lodge and Masonry. They get it from a lot of ancient practices and such. I would say that there's some of that you find in the secrecy of that society, which is a religion, by the way. Many people will try to say, "Oh, it's not." It's not. It is a religion. It meets all the criteria for a religion. But you see here in the context here of Revelation 13 that they would receive the mark. Now the mark was they're identified. Now remember, we're dealing with symbolic language here. Did you know that God's people in the book of Revelation, they have a mark on their forehead? Not a literal mark, but it means identification. That's my people. That's my people, God is saying. So they have the mark or the identifying characteristics of being the people of God. Well, these people who worship the emperor, they had the paperwork. They had the proof. And if they go to the marketplace to buy and sell, they had to have their paperwork with them. They had to have proof that they worship the emperor. Christian wouldn't have that. Christian wouldn't do that. So they had economic hardship. They couldn't go in certain places and buy and sell and make a profit because they did not worship the emperor first. And so this is the second beast of the Revelation 13, which was the religious clergy that was enforcing the worship of the Roman emperor. It was the religious aspect of the Roman Empire. Two beasts that Satan is using. Now, I only have about 4 minutes left. Some see in verses 11 through 18, some scholars of the past see here a direct reference in verses 11 through 18 of the rise of Roman Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church. The reason why I have problems with that interpretation is because it is referring back to worshiping the first beast. It's referring back to worshiping the image of the sea beast. So they're working together, and they are together at the same time. The Roman Catholic Church did not come into power until after the Roman Empire basically died off. Now, is there a link between the land beast and the seed beginnings of Catholicism? Well, I believe so. When you compare and you look at the ritual, you look at the dress, you look at the organization, you look at the practices of the Roman Catholic Church, it has all of the trappings of the Roman Empire. They had an emperor at the top. The Catholics have a pope at the top. He's their king. They have the worship of images in the Roman Empire. You find that in the Roman Catholic Church, the worship of images. And you can just go on and list the various things that are parallels between the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. So I don't see verses 11 through 18 as referring specifically to the Roman Catholic Church. However, the religious attitude and the religious activities certainly did give rise to that. And from about 300 to about 600 A.D., when the church became corrupt, when the church stopped being persecuted and was made lawful under Constantine, and the church and state began to merge, that's when you find the rise of the Roman Catholic Church and the rise of the papacy. Now, having said that, I do think there is a scripture that directly references the Roman Catholic Church, the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, and that's in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Read and study that and compare that to Roman Catholic teaching. And you see, I think, without a doubt, that Paul is talking about the falling away of the church, which resulted in the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. The man who claims himself to be God, the Holy Father, and likes to be worshipped as if he were God. I believe that is clearly set forth there. He said the Lord Jesus Christ would not come in 2 Thessalonians 2 until the falling away takes place first. And this falling away, this entity, will be around when Christ returns, because in verse 8 it says, he shall be destroyed with the brightness of his coming. Well, the Roman Empire is gone. The Roman Catholic Church is still around. So I do believe that that is referring to the church becoming corrupt and becoming the Roman Catholic Church. Revelation chapter 13 is an interesting chapter. We have come to the end of the class according to my timer. Read and study Revelation chapter 14 for next week, and we'll go into that chapter there, Lord willing.